this is the layout that we have for our course, our circuit. Yes, so before you go away and fly, it's probably a good idea to set some limits on that drone so it doesn't fly away or fly into that tree, which could be really nasty. So now let's talk about drone orientation and some tips for beginners. It's all good when you've got the drone facing away from you, that's face out like you can see right now. If you push the pitch stick forward, the drone will move forward. If you pull it back, the drone will move backwards, back towards you. If you push it left, the drone will move left. If you move it right, the drone will move right. However, that's all good until you have the drone pointing towards you. So in this case, if I push the stick to the left, the drone will go to the right. And if I push the stick to the right, the drone will go to the left. If I push the stick forward, the drone will move forward, but relative to the drone itself. And if I pull it back, then the drone will move backwards relative to the drone. So the movements on the pitch and roll stick reverse when the drone is facing inward. Now, the movements on the left-hand stick don't reverse. You'll notice that when you throttle up or raise the left-hand stick, the drone will ascend, and when you pull that stick down, the drone will go down. And that doesn't matter which way the drone is facing, you'll always get that result. Up is up, down is down. If you think in terms of rotation for the left hand yaw and right hand yaw instead of left hand turn and right hand turn, then that movement doesn't reverse either. Yaw does not reverse no matter which way you point the drone. So if you move the yaw stick right, you will rotate that drone clockwise. So pushing it right will create a right hand turn. Sorry, not only create a right hand turn, but also rotate the drone clockwise. In fact, a right hand circuit is a clockwise circuit. And pushing the yaw stick left will create an anti-clockwise rotation. And it doesn't matter which way, obviously, the drone is pointing, you will always get that result. So in summary, the pitch and roll stick on the right hand side will reverse as if the drone is pointing towards you, whereas the movements on the left hand side, that's up and down and yaw, will not reverse no matter which way you're pointing, if you think of yaw in terms of a direction, in terms of rotation, rather than a left or right hand turn. The other thing you want to do, guys, is fly at about 2 meters high. Don't fly too low. This is far too low. It's dangerous. Fly 3 mistakes high. That height off the ground is actually dangerous. If you make a mistake, you hit the ground, and that's the end of the flight, and maybe the end of your drone. One of the biggest tips I can give you, and one of the most important ones I believe for flying the multi-rotor in general, is that all forward flight is achieved by pushing that pitch stick forward. Now, you might say, well, that's pretty basic, and it is. But when you think about it, that's what you're doing. The only way that that drone is going to move forward is by pushing that stick forward. And you'd be surprised at the number of times I have to call out, hey, keep going forward, because someone stopped and now they're going sideways and they're wondering why nothing's happening. It must be something that happens in our brain. I don't know. But you push that stick forward and you basically rock the stick left and right in order to correct the track if the drone starts drifting off left or right of the track. So if the drone is already pointing parallel to the track, then all as you require is that forward stick and a roll correction to keep it on track. Yaw without roll will not fix drift. One of the biggest mistakes that people make is that they do not roll to correct drift. Yaw will just allow the drone to continue to roll, drift sideways. and that's dangerous. So here we are going along a track, and we're going down a centre line here of a runway. You notice that the drone is basically pointing parallel to the track, and any correction that we're making is with roll. So the dominant movement is pushing the stick forward, and then we're adding a bit of roll left or right to keep that thing on track. Now here we're just going to go off the track a little bit more to show you what I mean. So we're parallel to the track. So to bring it back to the track, we're rolling left back onto the track while keeping that stick moving forward. As I say, that's one of the biggest tips that I can give you. And the same thing is happening when you're actually doing that coordinated turn around a circle. Except this time, you're adding to the roll forward stick and roll correction, you're adding the yaw to make the drone continue to change heading. So I hope that helps. Now there's a few important things to consider when you're taking off and landing with your drone. The first thing you want to do is not have the drone too far away from you. 3 meters is good. The reason for this is that during takeoff and landing you don't want to take off or land too far away from you. So as you take off, you'll actually find that you want to control a descent up to your hover height, and you want to also, for landing, control the descent. Now it just so happens that the further the drone is away from you, the harder it is to actually tell where that thing is landing. And not only that, that as it is landing, to know whether that drone is moving forward or not. And you don't want the drone moving forward or even sideways on landing, because if that happens, the drone can tip over, and I will show you what that looks like on another video. Okay, so I'll just bring that drone back towards me. And I yawed it a bit. I didn't need to yaw it a bit, it's just a thing about the simulator, it's a bit sensitive. Okay, so on takeoff, I'm going to raise that stick, get that thing off the ground, and get that thing up to a height that's just above my head height, and that will be the hover position. Now there's one place that you don't want to spend too much time in, and that is about this height above the ground. It is the ground effect zone. In that zone, your drone will actually move sideways, it'll hover all over the place, it'll be hard to control, especially during landing. So either not just for landing but also for taking off, just get out of that zone really quickly, don't have to thrash the thing out of the zone, and just bring her up to hover height, and that's a safe place to be with taking off and landing, and indeed hovering. So as I said, make sure that takeoff and landings are vertical, that they're not too far in front of you so you can see where you're landing, and when you come in for a landing, make sure that you don't spend too much time in that ground effect zone, which is about the width of the drone above the ground. The first thing you'll be assessed on is how well you can take off and land. Now, as we've mentioned before, you must take off and land with the drone facing out from you. So what we're going to do here is on the simulator just show you that from center throttle position, which is normal for your DJI controller, raise your stick gently and just hover at about the 2 meter height. Then we'd like to see you maintain that hover for a few seconds and then land that drone vertically, face out and quietly on the ground, and then disarm the drone when you're there. In this simple move, we're going to drive the drone out to the rear cone, straight line, stop over the rear cone, and still with the drone facing out, drive the drone back to the home position. We'll demonstrate that now. Alright, now that you've mastered takeoff and landing, the next thing we're going to practice is just driving that drone somewhere. So, simple move, bit of skill involved because we're going to fly between two cones. We're just pushing that stick forward, the pitch stick forward, moving that drone forward, driving it out to the rear cone. When we're over the rear cone, we're going to stop over the rear cone. Not going to turn around anything, we're just going to simply stop. Notice in all this time we haven't yawed that drone, we haven't rotated it. No need to rotate the drone if it's already pointing out. We're going to use the roll to correct the track. So coming back home, back to the home cone, and simply going to stop over the home cone. Let it settle down there. So note those points. When flying it, you don't need to steer it, you don't actually steer it to make it go to where you want it to go. If it's pointing in that direction, keep moving the drone forward or backwards and use the roll to correct the direction. So there you have it, out to the rear cone. And then we're going to drag that drone back along that line and only use the roll to correct it if it goes off track. And there we have it, back home. Rotate your test. In this test you're asked to do a rotate following a successful takeoff and hover at 2 meters. So from a 2 meter height hovering in front of you, you're asked to rotate 90 degrees in one way, then rotate back 180 degrees the other way, and then finally return to facing away from yourself by rotating 90 degrees. This must be able to be performed in both GPS and ADI mode, and it's not that easy to perform in ADI mode, particularly if there's some wind. I consider this probably the hardest test of all in ADI mode, a real test of flying skill. Following the yaw left and right, you'll then land again. Be looking for accuracy, stable hover, and accuracy throughout the yaw movement. Alright, we're going to do that yaw in GPS mode. Nice quiet takeoff up to hover position. Going to yaw to the left, 90 degrees. Nice quiet yaw, not too fast, at the speed that you see right now. Now going to yaw all the way to the right, 180 degrees. And when we reach there, stop for a few seconds, and then yaw back, facing out, another yaw back. In other words, yaw back 90 degrees to end up facing out. This is not in ADI mode, this is all done in GPS. In this simple move, we roll the drone left, right, all the way across those front cones to the end cone, and then roll back to the center. We'll demonstrate this shortly. Now in this next move, this practice move, we're going to simply roll the drone across the front cones. Let me demonstrate. So starting from a home position, 2 meters high, drone facing out, we're not going to touch the yaw. We're simply going to roll. So because it's facing out, if I want it to go left, I'm just going to roll left. So it's travelling along that line. On a nice calm day, GPS mode, the drone should track pretty straight, maintaining walking speed. It's quite a long distance across those between the cones. They're actually 12 meters apart from center. So you get bored and you sort of like speed up. Over that cone now, good enough. Now we're going to roll that drone all the way across to the cone on the direct opposite end of this line. Now if you need to correct the track, again, don't use yaw to steer it. Simply use, in this case, we're going to have to use the pitch to pull it backwards or forwards on that track. So far we haven't needed to do it. So we're rolling along. That other cone in the background is the rear cone, it's not one on the front line. So moving across, notice that it's behind that cone. We should have been correcting that as we moved along, not at the end. In real life, you have a much better field of view and you can see where that drone's heading. Simulated, the field of view is pretty narrow, so you can't sort of like see out of the side of your eyes. You don't have that peripheral vision. So, you know, you'd like your primary movement is a roll, but you would correct that maneuver with the pitch to pull it forwards or backwards on that line. And here we are back home. There you go. Close enough. This simulator tends to drift. So that's just practicing a roll left and right. We'll now have a look at test number 8, which we'll call a horizontal circuit around the front cones. That is, it's a circuit that's only flying around the front cones in the pattern. Now this test consists of 2 parts, and to some extent it looks a little bit like a figure 8, although it's not exactly a figure 8, as we'll soon see. The 2 parts consist of, first of all, turns away from the controller and then turns toward the controller as you fly around each of the left and the right hand cones on that front circuit. So let's detail that. Starting first from your usual 2-meter altitude, the next thing you do is you make a right hand your turn toward the right hand cone, and then you head towards that right hand cone at a nice walking pace and in a smooth motion, not as you see on the screen right now, but in a smooth motion you continue round 180 degree your turn around that right hand cone, bit of banking in so that you don't flare out. Then you have to travel over to the left hand cone at a slight angle, and it's exaggerated on the screen here because of the distance across in the scale, but you continue over to the left hand cone to do another turn away from you, 180 degrees again, banking in to stop it flaring out, and then you complete that turn by a smooth motion which continues along the back towards the left hand cone, which we'll detail on the next slide. So continuing along that back straight, around now the right hand turn, we're going to do a turn towards the controller, then we're going to fly on a diagonal across the back to the left hand cone so that we can do another 180 degree turn around the cone on the left hand side. Nice continuous smooth motion, and then come back to the front, the starting point, and turn 180 degrees back, well, back away from you to finish the course. In that horizontal circuit, we're looking for constant altitude and a nice radius of about 2 meters, plus or minus 2 meters, around the cone, each cone. So what we'd like to see you do is travel up towards the cone at walking pace, and as you get closer to the cone, remember to bank into the circuit, into the circle, and yaw around as you go round. So it's yaw 180 degrees and bank into the circuit to prevent yourself sliding out. We're looking for a nice turn around the cone, nice approach to the cone, and a nice turn like this around the cone to return and head off to the other cone. Now we're going to have a look at the front horizontal circuit. Some people call it the figure 8. It's not quite a figure 8. I'm going to start by about 2-3 meters in front. That's this side of the front cone. Travel along parallel to the center line. Still in GPS mode, remember, these are all GPS mode moves. Still heading along parallel. And when that cone is, on this case, on the left hand side of me, I'm going to do an outward turn, coordinated turn, like all turns are meant to be coordinated, around that cone, continuing that yaw until I'm just slightly pointing inwards because I want to cross the center cone on the way back. Here we are, pretty much at that center cone. continuing that forward movement and using the roll to correct the line of travel. Don't steer with the yaw. We're only going to use the yaw to go round. Here we are, another coordinated turn round the left hand cone, outward turn as well. Now we're going to reverse the pattern now, and we're going to reverse it by travelling along the back about 3-4 metres behind that centre line between the two end cones. Travelling along, not too fast, don't want to speed up. Once you speed up, things go wrong. It's even a little bit fast on this, but it's working. Travelling along, now we're on the behind the right hand cone. We're now going to do an inward turn. Careful not to flare out. Don't forget to use that roll to pull that circle in when it starts flaring out. Yaw continues until we're just slightly pointing inward a bit. Again, so we're going to cross that centre cone so we end up behind the left hand cone on the left hand side. Here we are, travelling along, not too fast, not getting carried away, taking our time. Finally we get to that left hand front cone, and now we're going to turn inward. Our second inward turn, nice coordinated turn, using the roll to stop it flaring out. Now we're just going to continue straight parallel to that centre line until we reach the centre cone again, where we will stop. And here we are, back at the centre cone, and that ends that circuit. So we call this test either the vertical box or the vertical window. Initially you take off nose out to a 2 metre hover, and then still nose out you will move sideways to a position halfway between you and the 10 metre cone, where you will then hover and then ascend to 5 metres, go across the top to the left of you to a position that's halfway between you and the 10 metre cone on the left, and then you will descend, come across back to the centre, hover, and then land. So here we have the vertical box, or vertical window as people call it. Start off by moving the drone or rolling the drone horizontally, same height as hover height, out halfway between the two front cones. When you're halfway there, stop, and only using the throttle go up to about 5 meters height. Then when you get there, stop, then go across, roll across, and on those rolls remember to use the pitch if you have to correct the drone to keep it on that front line between the two front end cones. Now we're halfway between the two cones on the left, the centre cone and the left hand cone. Now we're going to descend. All as we do is just drag down the throttle. We don't touch pitch and roll. Remember, this is in GPS mode. It shouldn't drift. Now we're back down to hover height. When you're back down to hover height, you're going to stop and then simply use roll only. Don't use the throttle. Don't need to correct the height unless it's badly out of whack. Then roll it back into the centre cone, and when you get to the centre cone, stop over that centre cone. And that's the end of the test. That's all you need to do for that test. Vertical window, not too complicated. Now we'll take a look at circuits. Now these circuits should be able to be completed in both directions, and what we'll do is we'll show you one direction. Now in this one we're going to do a square circuit. So we start off at the home position, fly our drone out to the left hand cone on the front line, turn it 90 degrees, drive it straight to the rear cone on the left hand side, drive it all the way across the back, past the centre cone on the rear, round this cone, back along here, and then back to the start. We'll now demonstrate that. As per usual, take off from your home position up to an altitude of about 2 meters. Hover there. Then you're 90 degrees facing the first cone of the direction of the circuit that you're going to travel in. Once you're pointing to the first cone, then start climbing out at 45 degrees until you reach a circuit height of about 20 meters. Maintaining that altitude all the way around the circuit, go from one cone to the other as you go around the circuit, performing nicely banked yaw turns at each cone, maintaining that altitude height. Careful on that back straight that you don't travel too fast. Completing the circuit, coming back to the beginning, prepare to descend again back to the home position with 2 meter altitude at 45 degrees, and that completes the circuit. We are looking for smooth flying with even turns, controlled ascent and descent, and the ability to accurately position the moving aircraft while ascending and descending. Finally, to be able to compensate for any crosswind around the circuit. We'll have a look at some circuit tips to help you as a beginner. We know that flying a circuit isn't easy, and it's a lot to think about when you're a beginner. One way in which you can overcome this is to break the circuit down into its component parts. So, for instance, you can start by practicing climbs and descents. So from a hover, climbing at 45 degrees, what you'd be doing is you'd be pushing the stick forward and throttling up until you get that angle. While at that height, you can come back at 45 degrees, pushing the stick forward and lowering the throttle to get that descent angle. And you can practice this until you master just how much stick movement you need to make this happen. Okay, here we are with a ramped circuit. Going to begin at hover height. We're going to rotate first to point in the direction of travel. Lead off with the pitch stick, the forward stick, to create your ground speed and control your ground speed, and use the throttle to create the angle. We want 45 degrees. When you're over the left hand cone on the front, do a 90 degree yaw, finish that yaw and just point straight ahead to the rear cone, travelling along in a straight line, and only turn over the cone. So turn over that cone 90 degree and head along the back straight. If at any time we find ourselves either going in or out of the circuit, use the roll to roll in or out. Remember that rolling in is the same direction as your yaw direction on the yaw stick. Approach each cone fairly slowly and you'll find that it'll go around fairly nicely, particularly this final cone. So everything kind of happens at once here. We turn 90 degrees, we go ahead, and then we start descending at 45 degrees, controlling that forward movement with the pitch stick, keeping that forward movement slow and coming back to a stop, back to home position, and then you have it, and then you can turn out and end the move. So that's the ramped circuit. In this one we're going to have a look at how to create a radius turn, a good turning circle basically. So to create a circle you need to make the drone go forward. You also need to yaw the drone in the direction that you want to create that circle. And the third thing you need to do to stop that drone going out of the circle, you need to roll the drone into the circle. That means you push the roll stick in the same direction as your yaw stick, and that'll create a force into the centre of the turn that will counteract the centrifugal force trying to drive that drone out of the turn. Takes a bit of practice, it's a bit of coordination of 3 movements, but after a while you just begin to do it quite naturally once you get the hang of it. We call this test the nose-in flight. Basically you take off and hover at the 2-meter altitude again. This time you go out to the center rear cone, hover over that cone, then rotate 180 degrees so that the drone is now facing you, and fly back to the original cone, the takeoff cone, and hover there. That's flying face in. Remaining face in, you'll be asked to either go left or right from that position to the left or right cones immediately in front of you. So from that position, you might be asked to go to the right cone, and then you'll be asked to travel across to the left cone, and then return to the center, hovering over each cone on the way. From the center position, you'll be then asked to land nose in. This is a test of how well you can orientate your craft, especially since you'll be flying in reverse direction to normal. We will look at which way you push the stick initially in order to fly to the left or right cone. Let's fly in a direct line out to the rear cone, and when you get there, simply stop the drone, rotate it so that it is pointing towards us, and you know that it's pointing towards you because the front legs on the drone, I'll just point them to you, will be lined up. You can't see the back legs. When the drone's pointing towards you, move the stick forward and drive that thing home, making sure you've got your orientation right and keeping it on course to get back to the home position. From the home position, we'd also like to see you roll that drone across the front cones, like so, not too fast, about walking pace, keeping that drone still facing in, all the way over to, say, the left hand cone. We'll tell you which direction to push the stick, not push the stick, but which direction we want the drone to go on the day, and then roll that drone all the way over, across the front, not too fast, keeping that drone face in. Now some drones like the Phantom 4, you'll find this pretty easy to do because it's pretty stable. Lesser drones like the Phantom 3, they will tend to drift and you'll have to correct that. So here we are, over on the right hand cone, stop over that, and you'll notice it drifted a bit. We're not going to correct it because we expected it to do that, and then roll it back to center position, keeping it face in. We're not going to change the yaw, in other words. Back to the center cone and stop over the center cone, and that's right. In this test we're going to fly a square circuit around the cones. So starting off at home position, I'm going to rotate that drone 90 degrees and make a point to the first cone. So off we go, forward stick, that's all that's needed. Lead with the direction of travel, make it the dominant movement. Now as that drone is going along, I'm making minor corrections left or right with the roll, not the yaw. So I'm over the next cone, 90 degree turn, and if I did that turn nicely, it'll pretty much be pointing to the next cone because the course is actually square. Here we are, over that cone, 90 degree turn, off to the next cone. Bit of a long straight here, so the tendency would be to speed up, and I'm also sort of like slightly off field, slightly wide, so I'll roll in a bit as I'm travelling along. I won't stop and roll in, I'll just do it as I'm moving forward. Primary movement rules, guys. Then turn her 90 degrees, head off to the next cone. This is the last one before the final. In fact, I'm going to be turning final if this was a circuit for an aircraft at a flying field. So a little bit off there, but yes, forward we go. And keep it going, Rob. Always hard to see on a simulator where you're actually at. And finally back to home. Put the brake on, and there we are, back home. That's a square circuit. Good practice. Try not to stop at each corners. Use roll to correct the track as it's moving along, and do a 90-degree turn at each turn. And each turn, it's always the same direction, so you don't really have to think about orientation. If it's a right-hand circuit, that means a clockwise circuit. It's just a right-hand turn at every cone. So there you have it. That's a circuit, a square circuit following the outside cones. Be able to demonstrate that you can fly your drone in ATI mode. You must be able to land in ATI mode. So the scenario is like you're out in the paddock, you lose GPS fix, and you have to bring that drone back and land it. So just some words of caution about ATI mode. When your drone is in ATI mode, the drone will drift. You don't need to make big movements of the stick to keep it in one position. If there's a wind, you'll find that your pitch and roll stick, you'll have to find a position which will hold that drone in one position against the wind. And if at any time you get into trouble, you can always flick it back into GPS mode. Make sure that you've got enough height off the deck because you don't want to hit the ground, and just lock that drone in, because as soon as you put that back into GPS, that drone will be locked in. The other thing is make sure that that drone remains facing away from you. So don't yaw the drone in ATI mode. Keep it facing away from you. Now we're going to have a look at hovering and landing in ATI mode. So we're taking off in GPS and we're going to hover over the home cone. So we're just taking it out, putting it over that home cone and hovering at our normal just above head height, 2 meter height from the ground. Now soon we'll turn it into ATI mode. So turn it into ATI mode, remember that the thing might float away. Stabilize it over that home cone. We're just going to hover over that home cone, remembering that center stick is no longer center stick. Now we're going to land. We're going to bring it back towards us where we took off and vertically descend, trying to keep that drone stable, not moving sideways, left or right. And when we've landed, we can put it back into GPS mode and cut the drone. Going to go out from the front cone to the rear cone in ATI mode, starting off with a GPS hold, turning to ATI, establishing a stable hover over that home cone, travelling out, not using yaw to steer it, just using roll to keep it on track. Out at that rear cone, applying the brakes when you get there, stable hover over it, and now when you're ready, drag that stick backwards, keeping it on track with the roll, and then establishing a stable hover over the front cone again, and that completes the out and back. Now we're going to do a yaw in ATI mode, starting off with GPS as normal, putting her into ATI, stable hover, when ready, yaw. In this case, yaw to the left, 90 degrees. Keeping that drone over the home cone as a reference point, going 180 degrees in the other direction, again keeping that drone over that home cone as a reference point. You're allowed a meter radius drift, so that's pretty generous, and then return face out, and that's it. Now in this move we're going to simulate a GPS failure, so we're just hovering over the home cone in GPS, we're flying out in GPS mode out beyond the rear cones, And in this case we're going to ask you to yaw to the left about 90 degrees, and when you're ready put it into ATTI mode, and when it's in ATTI mode keep that as a stable hover out there, a little bit drift there, but we can use the backdrop as a reference point. Turn her face out, still in ATTI, and drag her back without going over top of any of the cones. In other words, just go through the middle of the circuit. Bring her back, stop her in front of us, bring her across so it's directly in front of us, stable hover, and when you're ready start descending vertically for an ATTI landing about 3 meters in front of where you're standing. And so here we are descending, making sure we don't drift too far to the left or right, and there you have it, a nice ATTI landing. Back to GPS and off. So here we are just demonstrating ATTI mode. Here we have it in GPS mode, it's on the ground. Our simulator has a moderate breeze going at the moment, so I'm going to take off in GPS mode, and even in that mode I would expect the drone to just move slightly on takeoff. Notice that the breeze is coming back in our face, so needed to make sure that that drone was staying face out on liftoff. So here it is, hovering, just staying there in space. Now I'm going to put it into ATTI mode. Remember that as soon as you put it into ATTI mode, that drone's going to go with the wind. Also notice that with a little bit of stick movement I can hold that drone away from me. It's getting a little bit too close there, even though the zoom setting on this simulator makes it look much closer than it is, but it's still, I want to hold it in that position. Notice that because there's a breeze, I need to hold the pitch stick forward and just hold it against that breeze. I was trying to drive it back towards me. There you go. So there's no neutral position in ATTI mode. You can't let go of that stick and let it go back to center. There's no center. There's no GPS, so it will not lock. Remember, at any time if I get into trouble on this test, I can flicker back into GPS mode and see the green lights come back on, and that thing will just hold there. So if you're in trouble, as I mentioned before, you can flicker into GPS mode. So I'm going to go back to ATTI with this breeze, hover there, and land that drone in a breeze. So we'll give it a go. And there it is. Landed it. And we could cut, but I'm going to just leave it there, basking in the sun. So one of the common problems with drones is they don't take long to disappear. You don't have to go far before they disappear from view. In fact, the Phantom 3, Phantom 4, once you get beyond 200 meters, it's actually hard to tell which way it's facing and what's below you. In this test we're going to show you how to determine the orientation of your drone, given that you can't see the lights, your app isn't working and you can't see on the app which way it's pointing because there's actually a radar on the app, on the DJI app anyway. So we're going to go out, push your way out from us, bye bye drone, bye bye, off into the distance. Nice thing about the simulator is I can just plug in a view like that and you can see close up what it's doing, and then you can sort of like zoom out like that and it's a long way away. The lights are a bit bright on the simulator. In real life they'd be nothing like that unless you're flying at night. So that drone we already know is face out. So that means that if we roll the stick to the right, then the drone will move to the right. And we move it to the left, it'll move to the left. That tells us which way it's pointing. Now let's just try that drone with it pointing face in, and I've zoomed in so you can see it. Lined her up, bang on. Legs are lined up, she's pointing straight in at us. Zoom out. Alright, this time when I push the stick right, it moves left. So that tells me that the drone is facing in. So very good, at least we know the drone is facing in. But what say the drone is not only facing in, it's also off on an angle. So there you go, put it off on an angle. It's off on an angle to our right. I'll zoom out and we'll test that. So again, if we move the stick right, it goes left. If we move the stick left, it goes right. If we move the stick forward, you'll also notice that the thing is moving right. That tells us that that drone is not only facing in, but it's also facing into the right quadrant of that circle of orientation. So all it takes for me to fix that now is try to rotate that so that's facing out. I'm going to guess, I can't set it a distance. Give it a left, give it a right, yes it's facing out, push it forward, pull it back. She's basically pointing straight out, as you can see. Now I can bring that drone home, and because it's off to the right hand side, I'm going to pull it back and off to one side. And there you go, I've got that drone back. Disorientated for a while, but using stick movements I could find out which way that thing is pointing and bring it home.